A federal appeals court turned down an appeal by the families of people killed from the washout of a Standing Rock road in 2019. A lower court previously dismissed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the federal government that was filed by families of the victims who passed away in the road washout that occurred in July of 2019. Their attorney, Timothy Purdon, says this ruling is absolutely devastating for those families who lost loved ones and those who were severely injured in the BIA Highway 3 washout. Purdon says that he's considering legal options, including taking the case to the Supreme Court. The families contend the Bureau of Indian Affairs didn't properly maintain the roads, but the court ruled the Bureau could only act based on the availability of funds.